Tasked with buying a stunning slave, the human chose to be the father of her children. Cedric Stormblade stood before the massive alien, his black combat armor gleaming under the harsh lights of the dingy space station bar. The creature, a Craxian named Roth, towered over him by at least 2 feet, its scaled skin reflecting an oily sheen. Behind the alien crime lord, 2 heavily armed guards kept their weapons trained on Cedric. "You want me to what?" Cedric asked, his deep voice carrying a dangerous edge. Roth's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his species. "You heard me, human. I need you to acquire something special for my collection. A female Lunarian." Cedric's jaw clenched beneath his thick beard. "I don't deal in slaves." "Then consider this a one-time exception," Roth replied, sliding a credit chip across the grimy table. 5 million credits. More than enough to buy the most exquisite specimen from the Nexus markets. I want the most beautiful one you can find. And if I refuse, the alien's compound eyes glittered, then my associates will ensure your remains are scattered across 3 different star systems. Cedric picked up the chip, his enhanced combat reflexes, noting the subtle shift in the guard's stance. "Why me?" "Because, human, you can pass through Nexus security without raising alarms. Unlike my kind, your species still maintains diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council." "You mean we haven't been caught running slave operations yet?" Cedric muttered. "Precisely. You have 3 standard days. Don't disappoint me." As Cedric left the bar, his mind was already racing through scenarios. The Nexus markets were the galaxy's most notorious black market hub, hidden within an abandoned mining station in the Outer Rim. He'd avoided the place throughout his career as a freelance operative, maintaining at least some moral standards in his line of work. Now it seemed he had no choice. The journey to the Nexus markets took most of a day, even with his ship's advanced drive systems. Cedric spent the time brooding in the cockpit of his personal vessel, the Iron Spirit, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace while trying to convince himself this was just another job. The Nexus markets lived up to their reputation. The massive space station was a labyrinth of interconnected modules, each specializing in different illegal commodities. The slave market occupied an entire section, carefully hidden behind legitimate business fronts. Cedric's stomach turned as he made his way through the crowded corridors. The air was thick with the stench of unwashed bodies and despair. Various species of aliens haggled over prices, examining their merchandise with cold, calculating eyes. The Lunarian section was smaller than the others. Their kind were rare, especially after the fall of their homeworld. Cedric found himself in a dimly lit chamber where several transparent cells lined the walls. That's when he saw her. She stood in the corner of her cell, head held high despite her circumstances. Her silver skin seemed to glow in the low light, and her heterochromatic eyes, one blue, one green, fixed on him with fierce intensity. Her white hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of starlight. "Magnificent specimen, isn't she?" A gravelly voice drew Cedric's attention to a short, stocky alien trader. Pure Lunarian bloodline, worth a small fortune. "How much?" Cedric asked, keeping his voice neutral. 10 million credits. "Roth gave me 5, Cedric said flatly. The trader's eyes widened at the mention of the crime lord's name. "For you, then, 5 million. The transaction was quick and clinical. Within minutes, Cedric found himself leading the Lunarian woman through the station's corridors, her wrists bound by energy shackles. She hadn't spoken a word during the entire process. Once they were aboard his ship, Cedric deactivated the shackles. "I'm sorry about this," he began. "Save your apologies, human," she spat, her melodic voice sharp with contempt. "You're no better than the rest of them, trading in sentient beings like we're cargo. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. You just chose the easy path." She rubbed her wrist where the shackles had been. "So what now? You deliver me to whatever depraved creature purchased me?" "Something like that," Cedric muttered, heading for the cockpit. "I'm Cedric, by the way." "I don't care what your name is," she replied coldly. After a moment, she added, "But since you asked, I'm Aurora." The customs checkpoint loomed ahead, a massive space station decorated with the imposing insignia of the Galactic Patrol. Cedric's hands tightened on the controls of the Iron Spirit as warning lights flashed across his console. "Approaching vessel, this is checkpoint Delta 7. Prepare for standard inspection. A stern voice crackled through the communication. Aurora, who had been silently observing from the co-pilot's seat, turned to Cedric with a raised eyebrow. Well, this should be interesting. What's your brilliant plan for explaining my presence? Cedric's mind raced. Smuggling a Lunarian through a checkpoint was a guaranteed death sentence. We need a cover story, fast. I could always tell them the truth, Aurora suggested with a dangerous smile. I'm sure they'd be fascinated to hear about your involvement in slave trafficking. And get yourself detained as contraband, Cedric countered. The patrol's not exactly known for their humanitarian treatment of evidence. Aurora's heterochromatic eyes narrowed, but he could see the calculation behind them. She knew he was right. Iron Spirit, you are cleared for docking in Bay 14, the patrol officer announced. Prepare for boarding and inspection. Cedric turned to Aurora, his expression serious. Listen, I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. I already don't like anything about the situation. We need to pretend we're a couple, he said quickly. Interspecies relationships aren't common, but they're legal. It's our best shot at getting through this. Aurora's silvery skin seemed to shimmer with indignation. You want me to pretend to be romantically involved with my captor? Would you prefer the alternative? She was quiet for a moment, then let out a musical laugh that caught Cedric off guard. Oh, this is rich. The mighty human reduced to begging his property for help. I'm not begging, Cedric growled. I'm trying to save both our skins. Fine, Aurora said, standing gracefully. But if we're going to do this, we're doing it my way. Before Cedric could respond, she was already moving through his personal space, her movements fluid and deliberate. She adjusted his collar, letting her fingers linger on his neck. First lesson in convincing others we're a couple. You need to stop looking so tense when I touch you. Cedric forced himself to relax, though his heart rate picked up at her proximity. Her scent was intoxicating, like starlight and exotic spices. He reminded himself this was all an act. The docking procedure went smoothly, and soon they heard the heavy clank of the boarding tube connecting to their airlock. Aurora had changed into some of Cedric's spare clothes, which hung loosely on her slender frame, but looked far better than her previous attire. Remember, Cedric whispered as they waited for the inspection team. We met at a trading post in the Outer Rim. You were a merchant's daughter. Please, Aurora cut him off with a patronizing pat on his cheek. Leave the talking to me, darling. The airlock cycled open to reveal 3 patrol officers, 2 humans and a towering Andromedian. Their eyes immediately locked onto Aurora, whose exotic appearance was impossible to ignore. Papers, the lead officer demanded, his cybernetic eye scanning them both. Cedric handed over his identification chip, while Aurora pressed herself against his side, her head resting on his shoulder in a gesture that looked surprisingly natural. I'm afraid I left my documents at home, she said, her voice taking on a musical quality that seemed to captivate the officers. We were in such a rush to start our honeymoon. The lead officer's organic eye widened. Honeymoon? Oh yes, Aurora continued, her fingers tracing patterns on Cedric's chest. You should have seen him propose. Humans have such charming customs. Getting down on one knee, offering a ring. She held up her hand, where she had somehow slipped on a piece of jewelry Cedric had never seen before. The female officer stepped forward, her expression softening. A human Lunarian marriage? That's unusual. Love knows no boundaries, Aurora said dreamily, then looked up at Cedric with an expression that made his breath catch. Isn't that right, my star heart? Cedric managed a smile, wrapping an arm around her waist. Whatever you say, Moonbeam. The Andromedian officer made a sound that might have been a snort. The Lunarian's biometric signature isn't in our database. Of course not, Aurora replied smoothly. After the fall of Lunara, many of us lost our official documentation. But the Cultural Preservation Act of 2387 allows for special considerations in such cases. Cedric tried not to show his surprise at her knowledge of galactic law. The lead officer was nodding thoughtfully. That's correct, he said, then turned to his colleagues. Standard level 2 scan of the vessel. Check for contraband, but let's make it quick. Don't want to keep the newlyweds waiting. As the officers spread out to search the ship, Aurora maintained her act flawlessly. She regaled them with stories of their courtship, each tale more elaborate than the last. Cedric played along, occasionally adding details that seemed to amuse her. And then she was saying to the female officer, "This wonderful fool nearly got himself killed trying to impress my father by participating in our traditional courtship ritual. Did you know humans can't actually breathe in nitrogen atmospheres?" The officer laughed, clearly charmed. "You two are adorable." After what felt like an eternity, the inspection team declared themselves satisfied. As they prepared to leave, the lead officer turned back. "Congratulations on your union," he said. "It's heartening to see love flourish across species barriers." Once they were alone again, Cedric released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "That was, impressive," Aurora suggested, already moving away from him. "Don't get too excited. I'm still your prisoner, just a more convincing actress than you expected." "Where did you get that ring?" She smiled mysteriously. "A lady has to have some secrets." Then her expression turned serious. "Though I suppose I should thank you for not contradicting my performance. It would have been unfortunate if you had." "You're welcome," Cedric said dryly, heading back to the cockpit. "Though I have to admit, Starheart was a bit much." "Oh, I don't know," Aurora called after him. "You seem to enjoy it, judging by your elevated heart rate whenever I touched you." Cedric felt his face heat up but didn't respond. As he set course for their next destination, he couldn't shake the feeling that this act had shifted something between them, though whether for better or worse, he couldn't say. The spaceport on Helios Prime buzzed with activity as ships of various sizes and designs came and went in an endless dance of arrivals and departures. The Iron Spirit had docked for refueling, and Cedric found himself increasingly aware of Aurora's presence as they waited. "I need to check the fuel manifest," he said, trying to ignore how she'd taken to wearing one of his shirts as a dress, the fabric clinging to her silvery form in ways that made concentration difficult. "Stay here." Aurora stretched languidly in her seat, her heterochromatic eyes twinkling with mischief. "Of course, Starheart. Where else would I go?" The pet name from their checkpoint charade made his stomach flip, though he kept his expression neutral. "I mean it, Aurora." "You don't trust me?" She batted her eyelashes innocently. "After our wonderful performance as newlyweds?" Cedric sighed, running a hand through his dark beard. "That's exactly why I don't trust you." Her laughter followed him out of the ship, musical and haunting. As he dealt with the spaceport bureaucracy, Cedric couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Aurora had been too compliant lately, too flirtatious. Every touch, every glance seemed calculated to keep him off balance. His suspicions proved correct when he returned to find the ship empty. "Damn it!" He slammed his fist against the bulkhead, then quickly accessed the ship's security feeds. The footage showed Aurora slipping out moments after he'd left, moving with the fluid grace that marked her species. Cedric grabbed his gear and rushed into the spaceport, his combat training kicking in as he scanned the crowds. The station's artificial day cycle was entering its evening phase, the lighting dimming to a warm golden glow that made Aurora's silver skin more noticeable, if she hadn't covered it up. He spotted her near the commercial district, wearing a hooded cloak she must have stolen. She moved confidently through the crowd, her natural elegance drawing admiring glances, despite her attempts at concealment. Instead of calling out, Cedric followed at a distance, watching as she navigated the maze-like corridors of the spaceport. She was good, changing direction randomly, doubling back occasionally to check for pursuit. But Cedric was better. Aurora's path led to the lower levels, where the station's more questionable establishments operated. She slipped into a dimly lit bar, and Cedric followed after a careful pause. The interior was smoky and crowded, filled with species from across the galaxy. Cedric's enhanced vision picked out Aurora at the bar, speaking with a tall figure in a captain's uniform. His jaw clenched as he watched her lean close to the stranger, one pale hand resting on their arm. Before he could move closer, Aurora's head snapped up. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Then she was moving, fast and graceful as quicksilver. Cedric cursed and gave chase. She led him through the bar's back exit, down maintenance corridors and through storage areas. Despite his superior physical conditioning, she stayed just ahead, her white hair streaming behind her like a banner. The chase ended abruptly when Aurora turned down a dead end. She spun to face him, breathing hard, her back against the wall. "Well," she said, her voice husky, "it seems you caught me." Cedric approached cautiously, aware that this could be another trick. You're good, but I'm better. Are you? Her smile was challenging. I got exactly where I wanted to be. He realized too late what she meant. In the confined space, her scent was overwhelming. That intoxicating mixture of starlight and spice. She had led him here deliberately, away from prying eyes. Aurora, he started, but she cut him off by closing the distance between them. You know what I've noticed about humans? She whispered, her breath warm against his neck. You're all so passionate, so driven by your emotions. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw. It makes you predictable. Cedric caught her wrist but didn't push her away. Is that what this is? Making me predictable? Maybe. She pressed closer, her free hand resting over his thundering heart. Or maybe I'm curious about all that passion. The kiss, when it came, was electric. Aurora's lips were cool against his, but they warmed quickly as the kiss deepened. Cedric's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer as years of isolation and loneliness crashed over him like a wave. When they finally broke apart, Aurora's eyes were glowing faintly, a trait of her species he hadn't known about. Well, she breathed, that was a trick, Cedric suggested, though he hadn't loosened his hold on her. She laughed softly. Originally, yes, but now. Her fingers tangled in his hair. Now I'm not so sure. They made it back to the ship somehow, though Cedric would later have trouble remembering the journey. What followed was a blur of sensation and emotion. Silver skin against tan, cool fingers leaving trails of fire, whispered words in languages both familiar and alien. Hours later, they lay tangled in the sheets of his bunk, Aurora's head resting on his chest. Her skin seemed to glow in the dim light, and Cedric found himself tracing patterns on her shoulder. You know this doesn't change anything, she murmured, though there was less bite in her words than before. I'm still your prisoner. Are you? Cedric asked quietly. Or are we both prisoners now? She propped herself up on an elbow to look at him, her dual-colored eyes searching his face. What do you mean? I mean, I can't deliver you to Roth. Not now. The admission cost him something, but it felt right. We need to figure something else out. Aurora was quiet for a long moment, then she smiled. A real smile, not the calculated ones she'd been using to manipulate him. Well, Starheart, it seems we have a problem to solve. We? She settled back against him. You're not as predictable as I thought. That makes you interesting. Cedric chuckled, the sound rumbling in his chest. High praise from a Lunarian. Don't let it go to your head. But her fingers intertwined with his, and Cedric felt something shift between them. Something that felt dangerously like hope. 2 weeks after their first intimate encounter, Cedric noticed subtle changes in Aurora. Her silvery skin had taken on an ethereal luminescence, particularly visible in the ship's dim night cycle. Her heterochromatic eyes seemed to glow more intensely, and her movements carried an added grace that made her appear almost weightless. You're staring again, Aurora remarked one morning, looking up from the navigation console with an amused smile. She had taken to helping pilot the Iron Spirit, displaying an innate understanding of stellar mechanics that surpassed even Cedric's experience. Something's different about you, he said, leaning against the doorframe. Has been for days. Aurora's fingers stilled on the controls, and a mysterious smile played across her lips. I was wondering when you'd notice. Notice what? Instead of answering directly, she rose from her seat with fluid elegance and approached him. What do you know about Lunarian biology? Not much, Cedric admitted. Your people were always private about such things, even before the fall of Lunar Ah. We're private because we're unique. She took his hand, placing it against her abdomen. Lunarians don't reproduce like other species. We require specific conditions. Cedric felt his heart rate accelerate as understanding dawned. Aurora, are you saying... Our bodies respond only to compatible mates, she continued, her dual-colored eyes locked with his. When we find one, our biology adapts, changes, prepares. And I'm compatible? Her laugh was like starlight-made sound. More than compatible, Starheart. You're ideal. Humans have always fascinated my people because of your adaptability, your passion, your capacity for love. But finding a truly compatible match is rare. Cedric's mind raced with implications. The glowing? a sign of successful conception. She squeezed his hand. Lunarian pregnancy is different from human gestation. Our children carry traits from both parents, but the process, it creates something new, something unique. Cedric found himself sinking into the pilot's chair, overwhelmed. I'm going to be a father? If you choose to be. Aurora's voice carried a note of uncertainty for the first time. Lunarian custom allows the father to decline participation. The child would still be born, but... No, Cedric cut her off firmly. I mean yes. I choose yes. He pulled her into his lap, one hand cradling her face. I'm not walking away from this, from you. The smile that broke across Aurora's face was radiant. I hoped you'd say that. She kissed him softly, then added with a hint of mischief. Though this does complicate our situation with Roth. Cedric groaned. I hadn't even thought about that yet. He ran his finger through his beard thoughtfully. How long until... Lunarian gestation is accelerated compared to human pregnancy. 3 months, perhaps 4. She traced patterns on his chest. And I should mention, Lunarian births often result in twins. Cedric's eyes widened. Twins? Something about the way our genetics combine with compatible species. Her eyes sparkled with amusement at his expression. Having second thoughts? Instead of answering, he pulled her closer, capturing her lips in a passionate kiss. Aurora melted against him, her skin glowing brighter in response to their proximity. When they finally broke apart, Cedric rested his forehead against hers. No second thoughts, but we need a plan. Roth won't wait forever, and I won't risk you or our children. Children, Aurora repeated softly, testing the word. You know, when you bought me from that market, I never imagined that you'd end up carrying the children of your captor, Cedric finished wryly. She smacked his chest playfully. Former captor. And no, I never imagined I'd find a compatible mate among humans, let alone one who'd choose to be a father rather than just a genetic donor. Is that common? Choosing not to participate? Aurora's expression turned thoughtful. Among my people, the bond between compatible mates was considered sacred. But with other species, yes, it was common for fathers to decline involvement. Many found our customs too alien, our children too different. Their loss, Cedric said firmly. He placed his hand over her abdomen again, marveling at the warmth he felt there. Though I have to ask, will our children have your glowing skin? Because that might make hiding them challenging. Aurora laughed. The glow fades after birth, though they may inherit other traits. My eyes, perhaps, or your stubborn determination. Hey, don't pretend you're not stubborn. You chased me through an entire spaceport. Best chase of my life, Cedric murmured, pulling her close again. They spent the next few hours discussing their future, making plans and sharing stories about their respective cultures' approaches to parenthood. Aurora explained more about Lunarian biology, about how their children would develop faster than human infants, but slower than pure Lunarians. They'll be unique, she said softly. The first of their kind, perhaps. Human Lunarian hybrids are rare enough, but ones with fully participating parents? I don't know if it's ever happened. Then we'll write the manual as we go, Cedric replied. But first we need to deal with Roth. Aurora's expression turned serious. I might have an idea about that, but you're not going to like it. You want to do what? Cedric stared at Aurora in disbelief as she outlined her plan. The soft glow of her skin illuminated the Iron Spirit's dimly lit cabin, casting ethereal patterns on the walls. Think about it logically, Aurora said, pacing with natural grace despite her changing condition. Roth wanted me as a rare commodity, right? He'd do a Lunarian bride for his collection. But now, she rested a hand on her abdomen, where their children grew. Now I'm carrying something even more valuable. Cedric's protective instincts flared. You want to use our children as bargaining chips? No, she corrected, her dual-colored eyes flashing. I want to use the possibility of future children as leverage. Oh, Roth doesn't know about these little ones yet. Her expression turned calculating. In the slave markets, do you know what's worth more than a pure Lunarian? Understanding dawned. A breeding pair? Exactly. Aurora moved closer, her fingers trailing along his armored chest. Roth wanted me as a trophy. But what if we offer him something better? A partnership. Access to a legitimate source of hybrid offspring. Cedric caught her hand. You're suggesting we pretend to work for him? Better to be valued partners than hunted fugitives. She pressed against him, her luminescent skin pulsing softly. Besides, Lunarians are notorious for only breeding successfully with compatible mates. We could string him along for years, claiming we're trying while actually building our escape. It's risky, Cedric muttered, though his resolve weakened as Aurora's familiar scent enveloped him. If he discovers you're already pregnant, he won't. Lunarian pregnancy signs are subtle to non-Lunarians. The glow? Most species attribute it to our natural bioluminescence. The changes in my movement? Expected grace from my race? She smiled mischievously. And you've certainly been thorough in ensuring regular attempts at conception. Heat rushed to Cedric's face at the memory of their passionate encounters. Aurora! Don't tell me you're getting shy now, Starheart. She kissed him softly. We need to make this convincing. Roth needs to believe we've developed a genuine attraction, that you've tamed your wild Lunarian slave into a willing partner. Cedric growled at her choice of words, pulling her closer. I haven't tamed anything. No? Her laugh was breathy. Then perhaps I've tamed you. Their discussion paused for several heated moments as they reaffirmed their connection, their bodies moving together with practiced familiarity. Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Cedric traced the glowing patterns that had appeared on Aurora's skin. You really think Roth will buy it? He's a collector, Aurora murmured, her head resting on his chest. He appreciates rare things, but he appreciates profit more. The possibility of controlling the market for human Lunarian hybrids? It's too tempting to ignore. And while he's focused on future profits, we'll be preparing our escape. She propped herself up to look at him. I've been studying the ship's systems. With some modifications, we could increase her speed by 30%. Enough to outrun anything in Roth's fleet. Cedric raised an eyebrow. You know ships. I told you Lunarians are private about our abilities. Her smile turned proud. We're natural pilots, engineers, among other things. She demonstrated one of those other things with a kiss that left Cedric breathless. All right, he said when he could think clearly again. But we do this carefully. No unnecessary risks. Aurora's expression softened. I won't risk our children, Cedric. Or you. You've chosen to be their father. Do you know how rare that is? How precious? You keep saying that, but I still don't understand why other species would reject their own offspring. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on his skin. Most species, they fear what they don't understand. Lunarian hybrid children are different. Special, they inherit traits from both parents, but they also gain something unique, something that makes them more than the sum of their parts. Like what? It varies. Enhanced empathy, natural affinity for technology, accelerated healing. There are stories of hybrid children developing abilities neither parent possessed. Her eyes met his. That's why some fear them, why others would pay fortunes to possess them. Cedric's arms tightened around her protectively. No one's possessing our children. No, she agreed, but we can use that desire to our advantage. Make Roth think he'll profit from future offspring while we prepare our escape. She smiled slyly. Besides, watching you pretend to be my stern master should be entertaining. I'm not pretending anything like that. Oh, you'll have to. Her fingers played with his beard. Roth needs to believe you've broken me to your will, that I'm eagerly attempting to bear your children. It's what he expects. Cedric grumbled, but couldn't argue with her logic. Fine, but I want it noted that I hate this plan. Noted. She kissed him again, slow and deep. Now, shall we practice being convincing? Their laughter turned to sighs as they came together again, their bodies moving in perfect harmony. Later, as Aurora dozed in his arms, Cedric found himself wondering at the strange turns his life had taken, from reluctant slave buyer to devoted father-to-be, all because he couldn't resist one captivating Lunarian woman. The next morning, they began preparing for their performance. Aurora coached Cedric on how to act appropriately domineering while maintaining subtle cues that would tell Roth what he wanted to see. A valuable slave transformed into an eager mate through human virility and determination. Remember, she said, as they approached Roth's coordinates, you're not just my captor anymore. You're my chosen mate, My children's father. Let that possession show through. Roth will respect it. Cedric nodded, adjusting his armor. Oh, and if he doesn't buy it? Aurora's smile turned dangerous. Then we move to plan B. Which is, we kill him and run. She shrugged at his surprised look. I'm carrying your children, remember? Lunarians can be quite fierce when protecting their family. Cedric couldn't help but laugh. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Oh, Starheart, she purred, pressing against him one last time before they docked. You're already far too deep on my good side to worry about that. Roth's flagship, the Crimson Talon, dwarfed the Iron Spirit as they docked. Through the viewport, Cedric watched Aurora adjust her posture, transforming from his equal partner into the role of submissive mate. The change was subtle but effective, a slight lowering of her eyes, a more demure set to her shoulders. Ready? He asked, fighting the urge to pull her close. Always, master, she replied with just the right mix of deference and underlying heat. Even knowing it was an act, her tone sent shivers down his spine. They were met in the docking bay by Roth and his second-in-command, a Cyrene named Kel. Where Roth was all bulk and scales, Kel was sleek and serpentine, her black eyes unnervingly focused on Aurora. Stormblade, Roth rumbled, mandibles clicking. You've kept us waiting. Cedric inclined his head slightly. Training takes time. So I see. The crime lord circled Aurora, who kept her eyes downcast. She seems different. Humans have their ways, Cedric said, allowing a hint of pride to color his voice. He placed a possessive hand on Aurora's shoulder, noting how she leaned into his touch. Kel's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air. Indeed, most interesting ways, it seems. Something in her tone made Cedric tense, but Aurora's subtle pressure against his hand kept him calm. My quarters, Roth decided. We have much to discuss. The crime lord's private chambers were as opulent as expected, decorated with rare artifacts from across the galaxy. Cedric noticed several items that could only have come from Lunara, and felt Aurora stiffen slightly beside him. Sit, Roth commanded, gesturing to a luxurious seating area. Tell me why you've delayed delivering my property. Cedric guided Aurora to sit at his feet, the position making his stomach turn even as he maintained his stern expression. She's not your property anymore. Oh, Roth's scales rippled dangerously. I'm offering you something better. Cedric ran his fingers through Aurora's white hair, the gesture both possessive and tender. A partnership. As they outlined their proposal, Cedric watched Roth's reactions carefully. The crime lord's interest was clear, especially when Aurora demonstrated her willing submission by nuzzling Cedric's hand. Fascinating, Roth murmured. And you believe you can produce viable offspring? We've been practicing diligently, Cedric replied, smirking, as Aurora's cheeks flushed silver. Very diligently, she added softly, her dual-colored eyes meeting Roth's briefly before dropping again. Kel, who had been silent until now, moved closer. May I? She asked Roth, who nodded. The Cyrene approached Aurora, her movements hypnotic. She bent down, black eyes studying the Lunarian intently. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. Oh, this is rich, Kel hissed. They're not practicing, my lord. They've already succeeded. Cedric's blood ran cold. Aurora's hand gripped his ankle, warning him to stay calm. Explain, Roth demanded. The female's scent has changed, her biological rhythms. Kel's tongue flicked out again. She carries life. Young ones. More than one, I'd guess. The room went deadly silent. Cedric's hand moved imperceptibly toward his hidden weapon, but Aurora's voice broke the tension. Is that not better? She asked, her tone perfectly balanced between submission and pride. Proof that we're compatible? That we can provide you with what you want? Roth's scales shifted colors as he considered. You knew? We suspected, Cedric said carefully. We wanted to be sure before making promises. The crime lord leaned back. And you thought to bargain with my property? I thought to offer you a legitimate business opportunity. Cedric met Roth's compound eyes steadily. Think about it. A willing breeding pair, producing valuable hybrid offspring. No more dealing with unreliable sellers or damaged merchandise. Pure Lunarian human hybrids born free and healthy. Born free? Roth's mandibles clicked in amusement. Worth more that way, Aurora interjected softly. untainted by slavery's trauma, more valuable to collectors who prefer willing companions. Cedric felt a surge of pride at her performance. She'd managed to appeal to both Roth's greed and his pretensions of sophistication. The crime lord was quiet for a long moment. "You will stay here," he finally declared. "Both of you. I want to observe this partnership personally." "My lord," Kel protested. "They clearly plan to deceive you." "They plan to profit," Roth corrected. "I can respect that." He turned to Cedric. "You'll have quarters befitting your new status, but make no mistake, you're here at my pleasure." "Understood," Cedric replied, helping Aurora to her feet. As they were led to their new quarters, Cedric caught Kel watching them with suspicious eyes. Aurora pressed closer to him, her presence both comfort and warning. Their assigned chambers were luxurious, but Cedric noticed the subtle security measures. Locked doors, monitored communications, guards posted nearby. A gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. Once alone, Aurora melted into his arms. "That was close," she whispered against his neck. "Too close." He held her tightly, one hand covering her abdomen protectively. "I don't trust Kel, nor should you. Sirens are empaths. She'll be watching us carefully." Aurora pulled back to meet his eyes. "We'll need to be convincing. Very convincing." The heat in her gaze left no doubt about her meaning. Cedric groaned softly as she pressed against him. "Here, now. What better way to convince them of our dedication to producing offspring?" Her smile was wicked as she began removing his armor. "Besides, I've missed you." "It's been hours," he protested weakly, already surrendering to her touch. "Hours too long, Starheart." Their passion that night was both performance and genuine need, loud enough to convince any listeners, while intimate enough to reaffirm their private connection. Afterward, as Aurora dozed in his arms, Cedric studied the security systems visible from their bed. "Stop thinking so loud," Aurora murmured sleepily. "We're trapped. We're positioned exactly where we need to be." She propped herself up, her skin glowing softly in the darkness. "Trust me?" "Always." Her smile was radiant. "Then trust that I have a plan. But first," she kissed him deeply, "we have a performance to maintain." A week into their luxurious captivity aboard the Crimson Talon, Cedric and Aurora had settled into a routine. Their days were spent maintaining their carefully crafted image, the dominant human male and his devoted Lunarian mate, while their nights were filled with genuine passion and whispered plans. It was during one such night, as they lay entwined in the afterglow of their latest performance, that Kel made her move. The Sirene's arrival was silent, announced only by the subtle hiss of their chamber door. Aurora tensed in Cedric's arms, her luminescent skin dimming instinctively. "How touching!" Kel's serpentine voice cut through the darkness. "Your dedication to maintaining appearances is admirable." Cedric reached for a weapon that wasn't there, but Aurora's hand on his chest held him back. "What do you want, Kel?" Aurora asked, her tone carefully neutral. The Sirene moved closer, her black eyes reflecting the soft glow of Aurora's skin. "What an interesting question. What do any of us want?" Her forked tongue flicked out. "Freedom, perhaps." Cedric sat up slowly, keeping Aurora behind him. "You're here to help us?" Help is such a simple word. Kel settled gracefully into a nearby chair. "I'm here to propose a mutually beneficial arrangement." "Why?" Aurora's dual-colored eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Because, a little star-bearer, or you're not the only one who's noticed Roth's collection of Lunarian artifacts." Kel's smile was predatory. "Or the secrets they contain." Aurora's breath caught. "The Celestial Codex." "Ah, so you've sensed it." Kel looked pleased. "Yes, our dear employer has acquired quite a treasure, the last known copy of your people's most sacred text. Hidden, of course, within what appears to be a simple decorative sphere in his private gallery." Cedric felt Aurora trembling against his back. "What's so important about this codex?" "It contains the locations of every Lunarian sanctuary world," Aurora whispered, "including those unknown to the slavers. Safe havens for our people." "Precisely," Kel leaned forward. "Now imagine what such information would be worth to the right buyers." "Or to the right people seeking sanctuary," Cedric countered, understanding dawning. "Indeed," the Serene's tongue flicked out again. "I can help you access the gallery. In return, I want a copy of the Codex's contents." "To sell to the highest bidder," Aurora accused. To ensure my own freedom. Kel's expression hardened. Not all of us chose to serve Roth. The implications hung heavy in the air. Cedric felt Aurora shift behind him, one hand resting protectively over her abdomen. "How do we know we can trust you?" he asked. Kel's laugh was like silk over steel. "You don't. But consider this. I could have revealed your true intentions to Roth at any time. Instead, I'm here, offering you a chance at real freedom." Aurora moved to sit beside Cedric, her fingers intertwining with his. The gallery's security is designed to keep out everyone except Roth and his most trusted servant. Kel's smile widened. "Which, fortunately, I am." "And what about after?" Cedric pressed. "Once we have the codex? That's where your performance comes in." Kel rose smoothly. "Continue as you have been. Let Roth believe you're settling into your roles. In 3 days, he's hosting a gathering to show off his newest acquisition. You two, during the chaos, we make our move," Aurora finished. "Smart girl." Kel moved toward the door. "Oh, and one more thing, your pregnancy. It's twins, isn't it?" Aurora stiffened. "How did you—" "Sirens are empaths, remember? I can sense their little minds forming." Her black eyes gleamed. "They're strong, special, keep them safe." After she left, Cedric pulled Aurora close, breathing in her familiar scent. "Well, the codex." Aurora's voice was thick with emotion. "Cedric, with those coordinates, we could find real sanctuary, somewhere safe to raise our children. Among your people." She turned to face him, her eyes glowing intensely. "Our people, the sanctuaries welcome all who prove worthy, including the fathers of Lunarian children." The implications made his heart race. "But can we trust Kel?" "No," Aurora smiled wryly. "But she's right about one thing. She could have exposed us at any time, and—" She hesitated. "What?" "The artifacts in Roth's gallery. I've been sensing something from them, especially since the pregnancy. It's like they're calling to me." Cedric frowned. "Is that normal? For pregnant Lunarians?" "Yes, our connection to our ancient technology strengthens during gestation. It's how we've preserved our knowledge through generations of diaspora." She pressed closer to him, her skin warming against his. "I could find the codex, access it. While I create a distraction at this gathering?" Her fingers traced patterns on his chest. "You're very good at creating distractions." Despite the seriousness of their situation, Cedric felt himself responding to her touch. "Like now?" "Exactly like now." She kissed him deeply, then pulled back with a mischievous smile. "Besides, we should practice being very loud and convincing for our performance." "Is that what we're calling it now?" Her laugh was swallowed by his kiss as they came together again, their passion both real and calculated. Let their watchers think they were just an insatiable breeding pair. Soon they would be so much more. Later, as Aurora slept curled against him, Cedric studied the subtle security measures in their room with new eyes. 3 days. 3 days to perfect their plan, to decide if they could trust Kel, to prepare for their one chance at real freedom. He placed his hand over Aurora's abdomen, feeling the warmth there. Their children would not be born in captivity. He would make sure of that. The gathering aboard the Crimson Talon was a spectacle of wealth and power. Roth's private gallery buzzed with the galaxy's most notorious collectors and criminals, all eager to witness his latest acquisition, the human who had tamed a Lunarian. Cedric played his part perfectly, dressed in formal attire that complemented his warrior's physique. Aurora moved gracefully at his side, her pregnancy adding an ethereal quality to her natural luminescence. Their performance had drawn appreciative murmurs from the crowd, especially when Aurora would cast adoring glances at her master. "Such devotion," Roth proclaimed to his guests. "Proof that even the proudest creatures can be properly motivated." Cedric felt Aurora's fingers tighten on his arm, but maintained his smug expression. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Kel had already disabled key security measures, creating a path to the Celestial Codex. Then he noticed the serene's expression as she watched Aurora. There was something predatory in those black eyes, something that hadn't been there before. "Now," Aurora whispered, her enhanced connection to the Lunarian artifacts reaching its peak. As she slipped away toward the secured section of the gallery, Cedric created his distraction, a heated argument with a rival collector about breeding techniques. The crowd gathered to watch, their attention diverted from Aurora's absence. But Kel followed her. Cedric tried to maintain his performance while keeping one eye on the secured entrance. Minutes stretched like hours, until finally, alarms blared. "The artifacts!" someone shouted. "They're activating!" The gallery erupted in chaos as ancient Lunarian technology began to pulse with light. Cedric fought his way through the crowd, reaching the secured section just in time to see Kel cornering Aurora. "Did you really think I wouldn't know?" the siren hissed. "Lunarian hybrid twins are worth 10 times what the Codex would bring, especially ones with activated powers." Aurora stood protectively over the glowing Codex sphere, her skin blazing with light. "You used us." "Of course." Kel's tongue flicked out. "But don't worry. I'll take excellent care of your children once they're born." Cedric didn't hesitate. He charged forward, tackling the siren just as she lunged for Aurora. They crashed into a display case, ancient artifacts scattering around them. "Cedric!" Aurora's voice carried a warning. He rolled away just as Kel's paralytic venom missed him by inches. The siren was fast, but Cedric had fought worse. He used her momentum against her, sending her crashing into the wall. Aurora had the Codex now, its light pulsing in sync with her own glow. "The coordinates are locked in." "Then let's go!" Cedric grabbed her hand, but Kel wasn't finished. The siren's laugh was chilling. "You'll never make it to your ship. Roth's men are already—" She never finished. The Lunarian artifacts around them suddenly blazed with blinding light, responding to Aurora's pregnancy-enhanced connection. The energy pulse knocked out every system on the ship, including the artificial gravity. In the weightless chaos that followed, Cedric and Aurora made their escape. They fought their way to the Iron Spirit, Aurora's control over the ancient technology clearing their path. Behind them, Roth's flagship descended into darkness and confusion. They were halfway to their first jump point when Aurora doubled over, gasping. "The babies!" she breathed. They're helping." Cedric engaged the autopilot and rushed to her side. "What do you mean?" "The twins. They're amplifying my connection to the technology." She smiled through tears of joy. "They saved us, Cedric. Our children saved us." He pulled her into his arms, feeling the warmth of her skin, the pulse of their unborn sons. "Where are we heading?" "Home," she whispered. "The Codex showed me. There's a sanctuary world hidden in the Carina Nebula, a place where we'll be safe." Their journey took weeks, during which their bond only grew stronger. Aurora's pregnancy progressed rapidly, her body glowing brighter as their sons developed. Their passion for each other remained undiminished, their physical connection a celebration of their freedom and future. When they finally reached the coordinates, they found paradise, a hidden world of crystal cities and ancient wisdom, where Lunarians and their chosen mates lived in peace. They were welcomed as heroes, their stories spreading quickly through the sanctuary. The first human Lunarian pair to escape the slave trade, carrying twins who had already shown remarkable abilities. Their sons were born under twin moons, their timing perfect as always. 5 years later, the crystal spires of New Lunara caught the light of dawn, sending rainbow patterns across the meditation garden where Cedric watched his family. Aurora's silver skin glowed with happiness as she taught their sons, Lyrian and Solarin, the basics of Lunarian energy manipulation. The twins, with their father's dark hair and their mother's dual-colored eyes, were prodigies. At 5, they already showed unprecedented control over ancient technology, their hybrid nature giving them abilities that amazed even the eldest Lunarian scholars. "Daddy," Lyrian called out, "watch this." The boy concentrated, and a nearby crystal began to pulse with light. His brother, not to be outdone, made 2 crystals dance with energy. "Very good," Cedric praised, moving to join them. Aurora met him halfway, fitting perfectly into his arms as always. "Happy?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "More than I ever imagined possible." He kissed her softly, earning dramatic groans from their sons. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Cedric and Aurora stood on their balcony, watching the moons rise. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Being forced to buy a slave?" Cedric pulled her close, breathing in her familiar scent. "Best purchase I ever made." Her laugh was still musical after all these years. "Even with all the trouble I caused?" "Especially because of that." He turned her to face him. "You gave me freedom, Aurora. You gave me love. You gave me sons. How could I regret any of it?" Her response was a kiss that held all the passion of their first encounter, all the joy of their escape, all the promise of their future. Above them, the twin moons of New Lunara shone down on the sanctuary they now called home, their light reflecting off the crystal spires like a blessing. They were safe. They were free. They were family. And somewhere in the galaxy, a very frustrated crime lord was still trying to explain how he lost his most valuable possessions to a love story that defied the stars themselves.